Well, I want to thank everyone for coming to this session here at the annual national meeting of the Green Party. Um, as Holly indicated, if you've come in, please mute yourself and hold questions towards the end of of this presentation, and I will try to answer them as much as possible. Even if you're going to post on the chat, I just can't see the chat. So we'll get to those later on if everyone's okay with that. Um, so with this presentation, again, I'm trying to focus on developing coalitions, and in a very fun way. Think of it like, how do we use like the Avengers and the not only the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but even the Marvel comics as well. And we're going to be playing with that idea and then talk about coalitions and in that kind of fashion. But for those who don't know me, my name's AJ. I use they, them pronouns. I'm out of the Wisconsin Green Party. I've been an organizer for like over 20 years and have developed and participated in various coalitions, primarily in the Midwest. I'm also a public scholar in the field of geography. I look at society and culture and politics and urban environments, and what does that mean specifically? I look at grassroots organizing, social movements, direct action, and other things that pertain to those areas, and and how does that fit into like cultural geography, political geography, and social geography. And for those who are on here, I've been an active Green member since 2007 at the chapter, state, national, and international level of the Green Party, former co-chair as well at the national level, as well as in Illinois and Wisconsin as well. So that's a little bit about me. So again, we're talking about coalitions. How are these formed? How do they sustain themselves? And what's the difference between coalitions, organizing, and movement building? So like these are the three things that was going to be the focus on here, and I'll try to get into some of the nuances of that in the presentation. But there's specific questions, again, hold them to the end, and I'll try to answer them as best as possible. But for most of this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on these three areas of this presentation. So this is first question of, how are these coalitions formed? And again, if we use like pop culture in this context a little bit, if you think of that first Avengers movie, we know about how they've come together, but like how is this formed? If we think about coalitions, how are they formed in certain ways? So there's like two broad ways coalitions do form. They're formed around community members that gather around a cause, or organizations that come together around an issue, if not a cause. So broadly speaking, like this is how coalitions are formed, in a very informal or formal way. And a lot of us have probably seen this before, where we've probably talked to folks in our neighborhood or at different community meetings that we participate in, and somehow we kind of galvanize around a particular cause, whether it be police crimes, economic issues, racial justice issues, environmental justice issues. That's where some of these community members gather, or at these kind of things. And sometimes it's organizations talking to each other, and talking about, how do we address this as organizations, because some organizations can't do things by themselves. And we also know that, when we're trying to take on issues, they can't work on silos either. So when we think about these things, so like one example of like organizations coming together is one example in Wisconsin called Get the Lead Out Milwaukee. The text you see before you is a little bit of a description of that coalition. It's made up of different organizations. There's Party for Socialism and Liberation is involved. Milwaukee Libertarian Socialist Caucus is involved with it. Cooperation Milwaukee's involved. And excuse me, get the Lead Free Milwaukee is another organization. So like these organizations have come together to address, lead pipes in Milwaukee, and specifically lead laterals. And lead laterals are those pipes that come from the main pipes into homes and everything. So this is something that they've galvanized around, and this is when these organizations have come together. They do popular assembly meetings every month to talk to community members, talk to faith leaders, to not only get involved in the coalition, but how to address this at a very, street level way, and try and build that power up from the bottom up to address to city officials, developers, construction industry, so forth and so forth. So this is an example of how organizations come together. Another organization there's one that used to be called the Sauk Valley Community Against Racism. And this is where you had community members and faith leaders who knew about the legacy of racism in this one geographic area in Northwest Illinois that is known as the Sauk Valley. And what they try to do is try to hold elected officials and institutions accountable of how the legacy of racism has affected marginalized communities in this geographic area. So they held meetings together, they have come together and talk about how, again, to address this, and, what are some of the ways to hold folks accountable, but also, what are some ways to decolonization efforts, what does anti-racism work look like in Northwest Illinois? And, so this is something where individuals come together to form organization. So that's how it gets formed, but actually building the organization, again, this is, again, broadly speaking. And then I'm going to try to pick apart each of these as much as possible. So when we think of a coalition, it's what's the first thing that you have to do, and especially if you're someone who's thought about, I want to do a coalition, or a group of us want to build a coalition, but we don't know what the first thing to do. So one of the things you need to do is, identify the folks that you want to be involved in the coalition around a cause. And then, you start developing community agreements or points of unity when you're doing this coalition. And I'll speak to that here in a very moment. And then organizational structure, what's that going to look like? Because it's one thing to start it, and it's another thing, how to really shape that coalition. And this is where coalitions don't get off the ground. Some folks we just come together, we meet, and that's a coalition. No, there's got to be some structure to this. There's got to be something on how we communicate with one another. Who are the point people on certain tasks? Are there affinity groups? Are there committees? What are the actions are going to be happening when you're in this kind of coalition work? So we have to think about organizational structure, and then the coalition participants. Who's participating in this? And some folks have done this before, but is there a vetting process? Is there not a vetting process? Is there going to be a membership? Is this going to be membership based? In other words, in order to be part of the coalition, you have to pay your $10 a month, $20 a year, whatever that's going to look like, in order to participate in this. Or is this something that is just open to anyone who comes to a meeting? And then how are we going to build a membership list from there? So, and then who's going to be the organizations involved? All of that kind of talk, is talking amongst yourselves, And when we get to group dynamics, we're going to talk about, that kind of participation level that's going to be involved. So with community agreements or points of unity, this is an example of 350 Seattle points of agreement. This is 3 out of a longer list that they have. And there's also even like sub paragraphs under each of these as well. But we're talking about points of unity. This is what we're talking about, for 350 Seattle, this is what it means to get involved with 350 Seattle. They exist to inspire people to act effectively to address systemic causes of climate crisis, trying to find the solutions and recognize the tension between solving an urgent climate crisis, so forth and so forth. And this is crafted by like that initial meeting that everyone, drafts these points of unity, hash out, what should be in there, what shouldn't be in there, what kind of common language we want to have, especially if you have different organizations coming from different ideological perspectives, where are certain points that there's a certain common ground, if any, and there's going to be different, ideological approaches to some of these things, and there's some things we have to part with, especially those on the left. All of us know that, we have different perspectives of, of certain cause and everything. But again, we try to aim for, the unity that's bringing us together, that yes, it's this cause, but what else is bringing us to unity together and everything. And this is where this initial conversation's happening, so we're drafting this, we're talking to one another, we're having meetings, we're also maybe talking to other folks about, how is this going to play out with this, we're talking within our groups, that is, so this is a very important piece, so this is going to set the beacon of why we're coming together in coalition with one another. Now, for organizational structure, these are 3 separate organizations, 3 separate coalitions. And as examples, all this to say is like, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It could look like something on the far left of your screen. It could look like something generic, like in the middle, or something on the right side of your screen. You can design your coalition however the group sees fit, but how is this going to play out? How is the communication going to be working out? Where are the point people are going to be in these different groups? Is, a committee going to talk to an affinity group and vice versa? Is the membership going to be the highest priority in the coalition, or is it the folks involved in the coalition? Again, these are not quite simple conversations to have. Many of us have been in these kind of meetings. Many of us know how long and somewhat contentious these conversations can be. So again, despite what your structure looks like, collective base, cooperative base, a generic top-down model, whatever that structure looks like, you got to know what the workflow is going to be. Because if you can't do that, then the structure is going to fail. It just will. And I've been in a lot of collectives, I've been in a lot of cooperatives, I've been in your conventional organization where you have, a steering committee or a board making decisions, and then committees, and then the membership and all that. And sometimes in some of those examples, there was nothing clear on what the workload was like. It was not clear what the communication was going to look like. It wasn't clear on, if there is like interdependent work happening or is just rogue things happening. So this is something that has to be clear from the very beginning. So here's some resources for those of you don't know some of these. You can take a picture on your phone, or screen share this, or screen save this, if you like. And I'd be more than happy to also share this presentation with anyone who wants to have this. But these are 4 things that I would point to folks when thinking about coalitions, especially the very first one by Joe Freeman, Tyranny of the Structurelessness. And there's a lot of good things that Freeman talks about. Yes, it's out of that second wave feminist movement. And there's some things that may be a little bit antiquated in our contemporary moment. But with that said, but there's still some good information in there that still withstands time. So I would look at Joe Freeman. There's a website called Libcom, the Anarchist Library. I think Marxist.org, have those, or you can just even, if you use DuckDuckGo, you can type in Joe Freeman, Tyranny of Structurelessness, to find a free PDF version of this as well. And then there's like these other 3. Renku Sen has a book out, Stir It Up. It's a great book that I use when I do workshops on community organizing. And these particular 2 chapters are good that pertain to coalition work. And then that's the second one by Bernice Reagon. You should be able to find it, but again, I have a PDF. I have that PDF of that chapter of this piece, and so everyone wants to see that, I have that. I'd be more willing to provide that for you as well. So again, if any of you have seen any of the Marvel series, or Avengers series, that is, and if we think about, again, the coalition work, we got to think about group dynamics. Because even like in the Avengers, they still had to work with group dynamics and still had to keep building group dynamics as soon as like different groups was folded into the Avengers, and even though, and some of you who are into like the comics, we know that how like the X-Men get involved and the Fantastic Four get involved, and the West Coast Avengers got involved. There was even group dynamics even there that had to be folded in and everything. But when we think about group dynamics in coalition work, comes back to this model that some of us may know if we have taken any courses or learned from folks about group dynamics and small group settings. So this is a model that has been used, and it's in its simplest form. This is how groups come together. If you remember at the very beginning, I talked about the points of unity and the organization structure and everything. This is the first 2 things that are vital in all of this. This forming stage, again, is it the community members or the organizations that galvanize around that cause? And then we get to the storming phase, the points of unity, the organizational structure. Are there certain point people in different roles in the coalition? Those kind of activities. So this is that storming phase that's happening. And then how do we like normalize that in order to shape that coalition? And so keep in mind, the storming and this norming phases are always happening. In a perfect world, we want to like come together, storm up the things that we need to be doing. How do we normalize them and then start getting to it, right? But that's not the case. Storming and norming is always going to be a more of a circular fashion here. In fact, if I took a little bit more time and edited this, I would draw another like dotted arrow to make a circle right here, you know, because when we start developing coalitions, there's always going to be these conversations. There's always going to be meetings, and we all know that we can't do a lot of meetings, because if we do that, it'll just be like the death of certain projects that we're doing, right? But when we come together and actually are working towards why we are coming together, we can get out of this norming phase and get into more of this performing stage, you know? And that can look like a myriad of things. But when we get to this norming stage, hopefully we get to our work plan together, or the strategies and tactics we're going to be doing when we address this cause. What are some of the things we're going to be doing? Are we going to let one organization do something that they're really good at and another organization doing something else that they're good at? So when it comes to group dynamics within the group, this is the model that we're going to be looking towards when we start developing the coalition more and more. But when we talk about intergroup dynamics, okay, so there's two things. There's intra-group, this part right here, the intra-group, and now we get to the intergroup. This part is where we talk about the interdependence of various community members and organizations in the coalition. And then this historic photo is of the original Rainbow Coalition of the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, Young Patriots, Rise Up Angry, and other folks that got involved in the Rainbow Coalition in Chicago. So while these organizations led by Fred Hampton, that they came together and they did their own group dynamics on what the Rainbow Coalition was about, they also knew like these organizations have like different things that they wanted to address themselves. Because the Black Panthers were doing things different from the Young Lords, different from the Young Patriots, different from Rise Up Angry. And they did their separate things, but when they came together, they had to rely on one another when they addressed their cause. So when the Black Panthers needed help, they reach out to all the groups that are part of the coalition and say, hey, you need to come down to Woodlawn because we need folks helping either with the free food program, and we need some folks handing out things or active security. Young Lords might come up and say, hey, we're doing an action. Can some of y'all come up and support us in solidarity and doing stuff and everything? These are some examples. So this interdynamic is also vital. So what does it mean when we come together and we're doing our separate things, but when we come together as a coalition, you know, how's that interdependence going to be pivotal when doing coalition work? Because if we're just coming together because, you know, we want to make our organization look good, or we're coming together, you know, just say we just did this organization, we just did this coalition, but if we're not doing it because of this one cause or the intersection of causes, then why are we in this coalition? And that's something I bring up. A lot at meetings, and particularly when I feel that, you know, we're kind of drifting away. I bring us back to center. It's like, why are we here? What's bringing us together? Why are we talking to one another? So forth and so forth. So this comes to contention. I think a lot of us here in this workshop have dealt with contention in one way or another. Um, and this is going to happen in that storming and norming phase of developing a coalition. There's going to be words are going to be said. Um, some folks might not fully understand what another organization or person's trying to say when to come across and everything. So it's a matter of, how are we going to deal with contention? Not just in the very beginning when developing a coalition, but when we move forward as a coalition. Because as we progress, we're going to see contention. And there's been contention in different coalitions in the time that has happened in the United States, as well as in other places. So what's the kind of conflict resolution plan that has been agreed upon by the coalition? If we don't have a conflict resolution plan, whatever that looks like, then the contention may not then the contention is going to sit there, and then how are we going to address this now at the beginning of the coalition as it emerges, but when it happens. There have been times where folks in a meeting just know there's contention and just don't want to say anything about it. And so they'll say, well, we'll just wait until the next meeting. Maybe it's a tough day, something's happening. So whatever that case may be, but if it doesn't get addressed as to, what's happening, then it will just fester out in the time of the coalition and everything. And then we're going to start seeing a lot of cracks happening in the coalition. And that's something we want to do. And, we also have to be cognizant that, people and organizations come and go. There's folks who come in and like what's happening, but if they feel that nothing's like happening right away, or feel like this is not the kind of work that was going to be happening than they expected, or there's just some ideological things that are just not are weighing on some folks, and so they leave, and that's okay. It becomes a problem if there's seen a pattern of things as when you start addressing an issue. But sometimes we start a coalition, people come and go, sometimes within the first 6 months, and one coalition, recently happened that I was a part of, and someone asked me, goes, why are they leaving? I go, because that's the nature of coalitions, and we should not be worrying about who's left quickly. If it's, again, because of a certain individual or maybe a certain organization that's involved, then that's something to be addressed. But if it's just purely that this is something that they weren't expecting, and that's fine. Just say thank you for coming, and hopefully you can come back or support us when you see us out and about. So sustaining is another crucial thing. It's also part of the conversation is, how we're going to sustain this coalition. Because the thing to understand is that coalitions in themselves are not supposed to be a long-standing thing. In reality, coalitions is supposed to be there like almost temporarily, you know, just like how some of us organizers say, you know, we're not supposed to be organizers for a long time. We're supposed to organize ourselves out of organizing, you know. So in other words, you know, we try to organize around something so that there's doesn't have to be any organizing to be had. Same with coalitions. You know, coalitions come and come together because these are other individuals and organizations that want to do something. But until that issue gets resolved, whatever that looks like, how are we going to sustain this? Well, one of the ways is to engage with coalition members. Do one-on-ones with the participants in your coalition. You know, take that 45 minutes out of your day if you can, and have that one-on-one with participants. See how they're doing. Talk with them. You know, how they feel about what's happening. What are some of the things they feel that needs to be improved on? What are things they expect to happen soon? You know, engage with them. And if you have a membership list of your coalition, you know, do that list work. You know, if you have, you know, some folks to delegate out some of these tasks, say, you know, hey, here's 5, go. Here's 7, go. Here's 10, go. Do that kind of level engagement. Another way to engage with folks is just have social events. You know, not everything has to be about meetings. Not everything has to be business work. You know, have a potluck, do a Sunday dinner type of thing. Go to a park and just relax and have fun. You know, if you guys want to go, some folks I know like go to a bowling alley. Some folks just like just to go to a patio and just hang out and talk. You know, and not talk about coalition work or what's happening in the organization. Is just there to chill, see how everyone's doing. You know, if your coalition happens to have funds, you know, maybe take some of that money and, you know, pay for food or drinks or what that looks like, or, you know, the activity you want to do and what have you. You know, that's what, you know, have fun, you know, because we cannot work ourselves to death or stretch ourselves out. You know, we got to have some sort of social activities happening and everything. We got to build capacity. You know, in order for coalitions to be fueled, it has to be fueled by capacity. So that relies on organizational members that are involved. Is like, how are you getting your members involved into the coalition, what that looks like and everything. If you are a community member, you know, how are you trying to get other community members involved and what have you? You know, are you doing an open house? You know, are you inviting the coalition to come to your meetings and talk about the coalition? Are you even talking about it during your meetings? During your organizational business meetings, and doing report backs as to what's happening and everything. Because if people hear and see what you're doing, is when folks start coming out. You know, but it's not. But it takes also a little bit more than that for sure. But people need to see. People need to hear that, you know, you did these actions. You know, you got the low-hanging fruit stuff out of the way, you got some of the mid fruit from the tree out of the way. Now you're getting more and more to the top of what you're trying to aim for and everything, you know. So build that capacity and encourage folks to get involved, even if it's temporary. You know, get them involved and engage with folks that way. You know, maybe this is the way to get some of your members involved that are not involved in your current organization. Just push them through the coalition work. So raise funds. We all are under capitalism, and so we have to raise funds for things. And by raising funds, we need it for any paid media things we want to do. If we want to have a staff, whatever that looks like, pay them, pay for social media promotions, just have money to, do some of the things we need to be doing, because most coalitions file as a 501c3. So when we file for 501c3, is when, we can, get people to contribute to the organizations. A lot of folks still look at 501c3s as like being legitimate or being established as an organization. So by using the 501c3 status and turning it on its head in order to raise the funds, in order for the things we need to be doing and everything, as well as, for paying to do like database work, or outsourcing to other organizations that are doing something, maybe paying an organization to kind of help build the coalition in that capacity as well. Stay on your plan, whatever your work plan is, stay on it. So when you talk about your short, mid, and long-term goals, stay on that plan. Things happen, so things may change. So we got to be flexible about that. But when it comes to the kind of targets that we're aiming for, the strategies and the tactics we're going to be doing, and again, what we're trying to achieve in the first 6 months, within a year, and then 2 to 5 years out or more, like this is the plan that we're staying on. So if we stay in our plan, we're going to achieve things. But again, it goes back to being flexible. We got to be flexible on our plan because things happen. Things also happen, as I mentioned earlier, when people leave. We got to be flexible when we have folks leave. So how are we going to build capacity in our coalition when folks leave? How are we going to be flexible when like a major event happens? We dealt with a pandemic, right? A lot of organizations did not know what to do with that. And a lot of us just kind of sat there and be like, well, this is unexpected. How are we going to do this virtually? How are we going to address this issue? Can this issue be evolved or addressed at this point? So, so a lot of coalitions got wiped out because they didn't know what to do. And those who stuck with it deserve a round of applause and getting through that pandemic and what they're doing the work now and what have you. So we just got to be flexible. If we stay rigid, then we're just going to break, so we got to mold in ways that whatever comes our way. So these are some of the things that I have found that you need to be doing when you're trying to sustain a coalition. So what's the difference between a coalition, organizing, and movement building? These are just very simplistic. And as you can see on here, we're talking about coalitions, as I've kind of mentioned earlier, it's about coming together around a cause. When we're organizing as organizers, we're trying to carry out actions around a cause. And we're talking about movement building, we're trying to grow around a cause. Now, can one form from another? Yes. Yeah. You can, if you're organizing, if you or your organization is doing community organizing work, that can form into a coalition for sure. you know, by bringing folks together around a cause, you know, uh, and that coalition can build a movement. Uh, we've seen this in the 60s, you know, through the civil rights movement. You know, there are various coalitions and they came together as a civil rights movement. We've seen this in trans and rights movements also, where there were coalitions and they build movements. Same way with the feminist movement, the environmental justice movement, you know, so, you know, all these grow, they can start out very local and then start building into a coalition in order to go into a movement, right? So absolutely, like these all build off from one another. So why are coalitions and social movements different? You know, and it says this is the one hang up. Because movement building and coalitions are different. You know, they may be like that far apart difference, you know. But again, that difference is when we're trying to come together as folks around an issue. And I should have mentioned this earlier also. So when we talk about coalition, this can look like a very localized thing in your municipality or your county. A coalition can look like within a state also. For a while, I served as a media coordinator for the Illinois Coalition for Justice, Peace, and the Environment. And there's a whole coalition of different organizations in Illinois around those three things: justice, peace, and the environment. And that's usually the bigger it gets on coalitions, you know. Movement building, you know, we're trying to build a movement for sure in a state, but also regionally, in the Midwest region, in the Southern region, hopefully in the United States. Like again, once we saw like in the civil rights movement, that was a national movement. So this is where there's that difference between that coalition work and movement work. So like that's the things that are different here. The other thing I want to bring up is, and this is a very common question I get asked when I talk about coalitions, is like government and nonprofit coalitions, and they're out there. These are three examples of the thousands upon thousands that are out there. Yes, the governmental institutions and nonprofits do form coalitions with one another. This one here, the Whiteside County Healthier Communities Partnership, is a coalition within Whiteside County, again, Northwest Illinois. And there's a lot of folks that work in education, education administrators, social service professionals, business leaders, sometimes faith leaders, and I know I'm missing one other group, and different nonprofits, you know, come together and talk about what a healthier community looks like in Whiteside County. And they have monthly meetings where they have different task force there, and they try to, and their goal is to communicate to one another on, you know, how do we address obesity, diabetes, substance use disorder, suicide, so forth and so forth, you know. So that's what they try to do, and they only work within institutions. They don't work with community organizations or grassroots organizations. They only talk amongst themselves. They're also part of United Way. So all of them are funded through United Way. So they also have a tendency to listen to United Way as to what's happening. This has been my experience when I've worked within that organization, and address some of those issues that they have and still have in that organization and everything. Again, that's the county level. This Prince Albert Food Coalition is just focusing on one topic, which is food, and talk about, how to make food pantries better, or other institutions that offer food and everything. And sometimes, and these people do good work, but again, they're talking amongst themselves, they're talking to institutions, they're trying to do certain, like, reformist work that's happening in their area instead of real reform in their area. So having dealt with these kind of groups also, it can be challenging, and I guess the gist of all this is that you have institutions that co-opt language like coalitions, and saying, and they feel like this is what a real coalition looks like. This is the kind of stuff we're doing, not what y'all do on a grassroots level. And then even like this last one, this Florida Local Government Coalition, that's just a coalition of like public administrators and city council managers. That's all that is, and then there's different state and municipal government coalitions that do the same thing like this. So this is again a few examples, excuse me, that are happening right now in our own communities and states right now. And anytime you talk to these folks about, what are this grassroots coalition's doing, they'll just balk at it. They may put a nice gesture out there and say, they're doing decent work, but this is the real work, is right what we're doing and everything. And those of us who are on here may know that, you can't reform a system that we have. In order to do real reform, we have to do it, on a grassroots level and build coalitions in order to advance causes and everything. And that's what's happened since labor, environmental justice groups, different racial justice groups, queer and trans groups, feminist groups, so forth and so forth. So we all know, like, all of them have shifted paradigms in our country, at least as far back as like the 60s. So I just want to end to say that, coalition work is hard. It's something doesn't get readily get up and going, within the first 6 months. If you have like a high performing group, then yes, you can get stuff done relatively quickly. I have been in those high performing groups before, and meetings have been smooth. Project plans have been developed and executed. We've gotten things done. We've gotten recognition, and some of them are no longer exist because we've fulfilled our obligation on what we wanted to do and everything. Some have withstand since their inceptions and everything. And there's even organizations now, like started in the 80s, they're still growing strong right now. And I also encourage you to look at different other coalitions that have happened, historically and today, and see what their process is. If you know some of those groups, have a conversation with them. I don't know about many of you, but at least for me, I don't feel like we talk to different groups to see, how you get this stuff done. That's what I've been doing for the last 20 years, because I'm a very curious person. I want to know how like the Mothers of East LA are still like the strong force that's happening in Los Angeles. How are like a Black and Pink that's happening, why they are still going strong. And many other examples, even stuff that's happening in the global South. There's coalitions I've seen in South America and Africa that I look at, and I just get inspired and read up on what they're doing and see how that applies here in the United States, even though we don't have that kind of somewhat protest cultures that sometimes that organizing culture that other places have. But still, I still get fueled by the inspiration and doing that some of the stuff. So with all that said, we can do this, as long as we understand our dynamics, we understand how we can sustain it. What we need to do at the very beginning when doing this work and everything. Contention is going to happen in our groups, and we can start building coalitions in order to develop movements and advance our organizing work. So with that, I am going to stop here and see if you have any questions.
Let's see. If people want to put things in the chat, I'll try to. I see Nicola Nanda has his hand raised, and I believe you are able to unmute if you can unmute yourselves. I see Nicola Nanda has raised his hand, and so Craig Matthews says has to go to a meeting, but we can get a copy of the presentation. And Nick, Nick, yeah, can you unmute? And Mike, Vic, and one other. I've got Nick, Mike, and somebody else. Nick, can you speak up? Let's see. I'm asking you to unmute here. See if you can do that. Okay, Nick, you're not. You're still muted. There you go.
Yeah, I heard you. I'm trying to. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So I'm having a challenge. It's not here with my speakers, and as I just moved my computer to put the camera on. A couple of things. First of all, AJ, thank you for the presentation. I missed the beginning of it, and I apologize, but the time difference here, I was off doing something else. Okay. So first of all, someone made a comment. I'm not going to say who, but they would know who it is, that said, wow, I'm really jealous of other Greens in other places because here I hear the Greens are all talk and no action. And I don't think that's too different. I think all areas are similar. There are some individuals that are more active, that more form coalitions, that work with other groups. And yes, there's a lot of talkers. And I've been a Green since '92. And I've seen thousands of Greens come and go, and some of them were the biggest talkers with no action. I see that locally here at times. But the Green Party of Hawaii has been on the ballot for 30 years. We have to repetition this year. Anyway, sorry for that introduction. I want to also say, and I'm going to, looking at Holly, she'll know what I'm saying, and I hand it to her because she's been as involved as me for as many years. As a delegate on the national committee, there are many, many people say, that's it, I'm out of here, I'm leaving. Because the vindictive, vitriolic way of Greens talking other Greens. So I think it's true with other groups. And I might, I'll just mention a few, but I'm not picking on anyone in particular. But here, we're in a one-party state. Everyone's a Democrat. So if I say the Democrats suck and they're all assholes, people aren't going to work with me. And so I work with Democrats, and once in a while, our number one environmental council member was a Republican. So I think, and so I don't know if you touched on that, AJ, about forming coalitions, that if you form a coalition with, say, Catholics, so we're into peace, but they're not going to be on the same side as abortion. And then if you form a coalition with someone else, so when you form coalitions and you work with other groups and you try to form movements, and of course, we're here as a party, a political party. Someone mentioned about, are we a social movement or political party? Well, to run candidates, we're a political party. And so I just want to make a addition, if you hadn't mentioned it, maybe you did, and I apologize, that when you're working with coalitions, attempt to be as diplomatic, using an NVC as you can on the issue that you're involved in. If it's houselessness, then you're working on that. Not everyone who's involved in houselessness will agree with you on Trump, and not everyone that, et cetera. So anyway, sorry for the long, Holly, you're fine to cut me off in the future. Anyway, thank you for getting this all together, and aloha.
Let's see, there is Mike Vick.
Yes, hi, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So thank you so much for this. I'm relatively new to like actual on the ground or whatever Green Party politics. I voted for many Green Party candidates in the past. But I love the party from the outside, and am happy to be involved right now more on the inside of it. I'm just curious what your experience has been with, and Nick was mentioning this idea of Democrats coming in or working with Democrats and having an issue with that. But I'm from the other end. The Green Party is the largest actual leftist party in the country, and so I'm sure that there is some influx of people from other leftist parties, other leftist coalitions, non-party actors, independent leftists, whatever. And I'm curious what the experience has been, what the actual practice has been in the party of welcoming people from the left who might be coming in from very different leftist kind of mindsets, and what how you kind of build that left unity around issues.
Yeah. Since it's been mentioned a couple of times, and I guess I will address that. So from the outset, my presentation was mostly focusing on like grassroots level type of things versus like what we do in the Green Party, because there's slightly two different objectives happening there, right? Because as a Green Party, we're looking more towards like electoral action, right? We're trying to get folks elected. We're trying to do all that. And is there some coalition work happening there? For sure. Particularly around ballot access, particularly around an issue. So we can get involved in different groups that way, right? So to that end, as someone who has also have lived in a one-party state in Illinois with Democrats, and now in essentially a swing state, mostly a Republican-leaning state, Wisconsin, the question of working with Democrats, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, when you try to come together as a coalition, you got to have these necessary conversations as to what is the purpose of this coalition, what is unifying us around this coalition, right? And what are some of the ideological things that we're bringing into this coalition and everything. And there's some things, again, we're going to have an impasse on ideologically, right? But there's others that, sure, me as a leftist, I have certain things that I'm going to bring forward into a coalition, as well as possibly gently nudge the coalition to go a certain way. But with that said, if we have to work with some folks, then we may have to do that. But that also may be a way to say, okay, our organization is not willing to do that. But if your organization or organizations have that experience, please go do that work and, maybe advance that for us and everything on behalf of the coalition, But if you need some mass mobilization efforts to show up to something, that's going to be different. Have people show up at the state capitol, have people show up at City Hall, have people show up at, whatever public space you have in your areas, you know. That's that can be done. But in terms of working with, you know, Democrats, that's a conversation that has to happen very early on in that group dynamic process, and you know how we first form as a coalition.
Mike H. Was next on the list. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm a founding member of the Green Rainbow Party in Massachusetts going back to 2002. So we started off the Green Rainbow Party as sort of like a coalition. There was the Rainbow Coalition Party of Massachusetts that I was involved in, and there was the Massachusetts Greens. So I think one of the beautiful things about the state party in Massachusetts is that we grew out of two different groups working together, and we discovered that we had a lot in common and that it made more sense to be working together. So just want to talk a little bit about our history in Massachusetts. One of the things that I've heard within the party going back to the beginning is, what kind of organization are we? Are we an electoral party? Are we about building movements? And I think the answer is both. And I think the problem is that if we just see ourselves as an electoral party, we're not working with others. You know, and it's I think that since we don't have in many places a focus on working with others, being part of coalitions, that I think that this is one of the major reasons why we're so damn small. And I just wanted to throw that out. Cornell West is an exciting possibility for us. And I think in the history of the Green Party, it's like we've had our own people run, you know, like I'm from Massachusetts, Jill Stein, and she brought a lot of resources into the party in her two campaigns, but she's just a Green, that's her base. Now with Cornell West, we have the Greens working with somebody who has a base outside of the Green Party. And I think this is very exciting. And it's my hope that the efforts will take advantage of this opportunity and not only try and get, let's say, people of color in Massachusetts to work with Greens in support of Cornell, but to build a party that's ongoing, that's going to be much stronger in terms of our anti-racism, because we've made links with others. So I see it, the goal is not just 2024, but how can we build for the long term? And if we just see ourselves as an electoral party, I think we're missing the boat. Reactions by anybody?
I guess I'll just say, no, I hear what you're saying, Mike, and for sure, you know, you do need to have different, again, strategies and tactics when you're doing whatever the coalition is doing and everything. So, you know, there could be electoral action arm, if it were, and then like this, you know, possibly building a movement arm also. So you do need to have those things to happen, depending on what you're doing. But we also need to also, again, understand that when we come together, you know, what is the specific thing that we're trying to do, you know? So like, as Greens, you know, if we're doing, say, coalition work around ranked choice voting, right? Then like, what is our aim when we do RCV? Are we getting involved with other RCV groups in our states, in our regions, and what have you? And is there a electoral strategy with that to advance legislation, whether it be local or state? Or is it just purely just trying to get folks together and to educate folks about ranked choice voting so that legislation can be had by way of popular opinion or what have you? So yeah, I mean, you do need to have those initial conversations again as to, you know, when you do your work plan, what you need to be doing, whatever the cause or the intersection of causes that are happening. I hope that makes sense. I do want to, as I did see one question in the chat from John about, do you feel as utilizing benchmarks are good to use in coalitions? Yeah, when you do your work plan, you have to set benchmarks. You know, what are you going to see in the first 6 months? What are you going to see in the first year? What's going to see in the next 2 or more years? And then then how are we going to acknowledge those accomplishments, whatever those look like? You know, so you got to set those kind of benchmarks when you're doing your work plan. Did I miss anything else?
Nick has another question. I think that's the only hand I see up.
Yeah, thanks. Did you want us to use the raise hand function?
Please.
Either one.
Okay, good. So thanks. Yeah, reflection. Thank you for your answer, AJ. I thought Mike's discussion of the party, I really love that, the party in Massachusetts. Thank you for that. We are both a political party. And yes, for someone who's been around for 30 years, we go back and forth. You know, there's some people that only want to form, issues. And then, of course, we're electoral politics. So you have people running for president, you have people running for Congress who, have zero chance of winning, but there's reasons some states you need to have a presidential candidate. And I do want to say when the comment was about Cornel West, who I love and support totally now and had met in '95 early on with the Greens. Don't forget Ralph Nader. And that's part of it. Jill, Howie, different people that have run in the past have brought some people to the Greens. But from where I sit, being on an island in the middle of the ocean, yes, Cornell's going to get so much more. Yes, he wasn't a Green and now he's a Green. And so we got to educate him exactly with the Green Party. But he was around Nader when Nader ran. So he's familiar with us. So, yeah, I think we need to do this and that and even more. So coalitions. And again, AJ, thank you for your presentation because it really was spot on. Mahalo.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other raised hands yet. My clock says, and I'm not sure I'm right about this, it says we end, it would be AJ 5 o'clock Central Time. Is that correct?
I didn't get an end time, but it sounds about right.
There's supposed to be about an hour and a quarter. An hour and a half.
It ends at noon Hawaii time.
Okay. Someone says, yes, thank you. Susan, thank you. So yes, so we have 5 minutes. There's nothing coming up directly after this, but probably should step out if people want to continue the conversation or something, or set up a group to do more. The next thing coming up, it's at 7 o'clock Eastern, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, whatever. And there will be a film introduction to everything, and then a film Ithaca, which is about John Shipton's efforts to free his son and raise awareness of journalism and freedom of the press. The son is Julian Assange, and we were really lucky to get that film from Bullfrog Films. And the father and I believe the brother, who was the producer, will be available for a little bit after the call for Q&A. And then there'll be a code. If you don't get to see it tonight, it's going to be available for the next 3 days. They gave us a big discount on this. They were really happy that the Green Party was interested in this. So you can see that tonight. For the next 3 days. And then if you check online, of course, you can see all the other great workshops and programs coming up too. Another film is Saturday night, I think. Is it Saturday night? Featuring, it's on healthcare coverage featuring members of the Washington Green Party. And other great workshops. AJ Reed.
Yeah, well, thank everyone for attending this. This was great for y'all to show up here, and hope to see you all soon.
Yeah, thanks. AJ, just let me know when you want to close the call and see everybody.
You can go
else.
ahead, Holly.
Okay, thanks again. Have a good evening.